Good evening. I'm Carrie Fox. I'm the Deputy Director at the New Children's Museum, and I want to welcome all of you to tonight's Artist Talk. We love this series. This is the third one we've done, and tonight is very special because we have Wes Bruce here. He's an artist that we worked with several years ago, and he's back to do a new project. So before we get started, we're going to show you the Wonder Sound. We did a movie with Wes a few years back for the Wonder Sound, and we're going to show you the trailer. It's about 2 minutes. It's going to set the stage for tonight's talk. And when the video is done, Megan Dickerson, our Director of Exhibitions, is going to be back, and she will be the one talking with Wes tonight.
To love something is to have a very particularizing language for it. We love what we name. So for all of these people who've been part of the process, they've given it their own name. And the fact that you really couldn't do it alone.
We were able to make a shift to really thinking about, who are we as a museum, as a children's museum that commissions artists, that says we engage kids? What does that look like?
To find somebody who would be willing to kind of go on this whole journey and would understand that at the center of all this is the playing child. There's the playing child, there's the supporting adult, and there's the broader community, and where we're connecting with that community.
There's that thread of connectedness, and he did this for our museum.
It's hands down the biggest undertaking I've ever had with a project. I've put in a huge amount of myself working with this mantra that the things that are most personal are going to be the most universal.
For someone to come in here and find it and know that they can walk through any part of it or climb through or whatever it is that they have to do, they create their own personal relationship with the work. And I think that's another element of art. It's a personal relationship that Wes has allowed us to create.
Just packing it full of content that can be absorbed on so many different levels. A lot of objects from junkyards in Colorado that I brought out here, objects gathered and garnered from around San Diego.
There's writing everywhere and there's objects everywhere.
It's just this world. It's like my childhood imagined, but in real life.
What is it that you're going to see that's different than what I see? Open my eyes to what that is. Everybody's bringing their own memories into any space that they go into. This gives you the place to talk about them if you wish, or follow the lead of someone else as they make their own memories.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our talk tonight. I'm Megan Dickerson. As Carrie mentioned, I'm the Director of Exhibitions here at the museum. I'm actually on site in front of WAMX by Toshiko Horiuchi McAdam. And today we're going to talk to Wes Bruce. Working with Wes on the Wonder Sound has been and continues to be one of the great joys of my professional and personal life. 5 years ago, we opened a space that we had developed with 6 community partners from all over San Diego. The ideas were developed in workshops with children and families in San Ysidro, in Hillcrest, all over our beautiful city. And as a result, it created a space that's a contact space where families have come together, have made new friendships, which have lasted through the tough times that we've been through. About a year and a half ago, we wrote a grant to the NEA, National Endowment for the Arts, and asked if we could bring Wes back to create an extension of the Wonder Sound on the patio that's directly adjacent to the existing installation. When we wrote that grant, we had no idea, like any of us did, of what was to come and how needed that space would be. For the last few days, Wes has returned to the museum and to San Diego to think about that space and to build a space that will be a healing gathering area as we all recover from the events of the last year. And so with that, I'd like to invite Wes, who's not too far from me over in the Wonder Sound, to join us. Hi, Wes.
Hello. Hi, Megan. How you doing?
Long time no see.
Long time no see.
We've had quite a day already. We were not too far in the past covered in mulch, preparing for the project that we're working on. I do need to show that we clean up pretty nicely. This was us, what, like an hour ago?
Yeah. Show that beautiful mulch footage.
There we go. Nothing, some baby wipes won't clean up to get ready for an artist talk. But what I loved about it in the last few days, I mean, it's so great. My friend, my brother, Wes Bruce being back. But the feeling of constantly keeping the audience in mind as we're shoveling mulch, which we'll explain later on why there's so much mulch involved, but constantly imagining who is going to be in this space, who is going to benefit from the space, who is going to play in this space, right? I mean, how has it been for you?
Yeah, well, it is this constant sort of physical, emotional, spiritual empathy to imagine who's going to be coming through the space, and to imagine who's going to be, crawling across the ground out there, who's going to be interacting with all the plants that we're playing with. Even down to just like, should the doorway be 1 inch, 1 foot to the left, to the right, just trying to think, it's going to be nice to get sunlight from this particular angle in there. And, we'll get into this more as we start to have conversation, but really like this space is going to be a vessel for people as they come back into public, and they're going to be in conversation with their family in these spaces that they, either have missed because this is kind of people's backyards, or they might be on the first family vacation that they have gone on in quite some time. So it really is going to be a vessel for all of these moments of reconnection, of healing, of sort of coming out of this hibernation and processing with not only people they know, but also like that beautiful synergy and serendipity of conversation with other folks. Like one of my favorite things is to be able to have a nourishing conversation with a stranger that you meet in a place that's ready for you,
Mm-hmm.
And all of these places are ready and situated to be able to foster good conversation, good interactions with humans of all ages, like as many generations that will be in here, for that joy to come up, for like everything. Again, it is a garden. Like it's this idea of compost. We're taking everything that's been hard over this last season, and we are literally turning all of that, the good, the bad, the lonely, the joyful, the grieving, like all of that goes into this metaphorical soil that is being held on this new garden. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it reminds me of when we were first developing the Wonder Sound. We had conversations like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now coming out of a global crisis, how does it feel different to you than when we were developing it 5 years ago?
Yeah. It really does. I think since I think of the Wonder Sound like as this living, thinking, breathing, feeling creature that lives with its own presence here and has since we opened it in 2016. And so there's already sort of like this kind of comfort food element to it. Like it's known by folks. It is this heart space for a lot of people, and people miss how they know themselves in the museum as a whole. It's like a comfortable pair of clothes. Like a lot of folks just really know themselves well in all of these spaces, including Wonder Sound. And I've noticed like very thoroughly as I've started to come back out, and I've been doing a handful of things with different museums over this sort of tail end of this last crazy season. And people's hearts are really on their sleeves. They're really craving quality, physical, in-person interactions, right? They're willing to be vulnerable. They are very eager to share their stories with folks and to have, again, like this interaction that means something to them. And this space has always been that. And it's I think it feels like kind of primed right now. In a strange way, it went from being like the last place anyone wanted to go in public because it's so hands-on. There's so many people. There's so much like cross-pollination. So we paused it, right? And now I think like anything that's built well and built with great intention, like there's a little bit of like, won't go as far as saying timelessness to it, but like it's swung back around to being something that people really need and are craving. So I think that temperature of just cultural vulnerability, as people kind of like peek their heads out, they're looking for places where they feel safe, and being able to have an outdoor area with big breezy spaces, high ceilings, just like that good airflow that everybody's looking for. You know, logistically and emotionally, I think it's what people are craving right now.
Emotional and physical airflow.
Yeah. Yeah. To air it all out. Yeah. What about you? How do you see this as being threaded back into the fabric of culture right now?
You know, I mean, I'm thinking about when we were picking up mulch today. Mulch is just going to be a theme, everyone. It's just lots of mulch. It's still in our hair. But the person picking up mulch next to us said, "Oh, are you all from the Children's Museum?" And I said, "Oh yeah, he's the artist who made, you know, the big treehouse thing on the top floor." And he said, "My grandkids love that." And I don't know if Wes could hear at this point, but afterwards the man came up to Wes and said, "My grandkids love your treehouse," right? And so I think that there's, my experience with children is that their memories are really good, and they'll remember very specific things and very specific conversations that you've had. And so coming back to the Wonder Sound in particular, and also of course to WAMIC for those who got to experience it before pandemic, it's going back to a room in your imagination. You know, like Prasadini said in the trailer, it's like my childhood imagined, but in real life. Yeah.
Right before we started, I kind of went through and read some of the poems at the front entryway of the Wonder Sound, just to kind of like even go back to the origins of the whole thing. And even though it's kind of towards the front, I feel like it's worth saying again. And a lot of folks, even if you've been here, you might not have sort of caught on to this, but the name of the exhibition, the Wonder Sound, kind of has this multi kind of onion skinned meaning, and it's really beautiful how well it sits right now. So if you think of the word sound, most folks naturally would think of like, oh, hearing, there's a sound in the room. What is that? But it also has a lot of other meanings that I think are really beautiful and poetic. And this idea that sound can also mean a body of water that separates two areas or connects two areas. So like Puget Sound or Long Island Sound, it's like, it's a threshold. You have to cross the Puget Sound to get from one place to the other. So it's a threshold, it's a doorway, it's an opening, it's an opportunity. And then it's also a verb, it's an action. So if you're gonna have a doctor sort of sound your body, they're testing for things. And you can also sound the deep to test how deep water is. So it's investigating the depths of something, both literally and metaphorically. And then you think of the words to be of sound mind and body, or I am sound asleep. It's this synonym for wholeness or wellness and for health. It honestly kind of like makes me tear up thinking of this because of how much people have experienced of not being of sound body, like all of the grief that's come in this last season with how many folks have passed away, how many folks have gotten sick, how many folks have had all these symptoms. And we need places to heal. We need conversation. We need therapists. We need play. We need dinner with friends. We need walking trails. Like, it's so crucial for us to have these spaces that offer wholeness when so many of us feel fractured in this moment. And the Wonder Sound was designed for this type of nourishment, from the beginning, it's ready. It's it's so ready for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, it was written into the grant that we wrote for this particular project, for the Wonder Sound, it was written in that it would be a catalyst for change in people's lives, you know? And I really think it has worked. I mean, the number of times, you know, and those of you who are listening, I'm sure many of you have been to the Wonder Sound. If you haven't, we look forward to welcoming you back. But the number of times I've met up with people having very emotional experiences. And that's, I think there is a resonance between the way something is created and all of those conversations that we had, you know, with the creative team, you know, Charles and Eva and Jesse, right? And trying to think about what will this space be? And then we kind of midwifed it, right? You know, because I think one of the things that's just interesting about your process, and we were talking about this earlier, you are very much an artist with a capital A. You are everything behind you, you drew with your hand, right? You know, you created that in a way that people understand artists to be. But I think what's really central to your artistry is the way that you knit communities together and you make change in institutions. You know, I think that our institution as a New Children's Museum is different because of those conversations you had with staff. You know, you're coming back and people remember you. They're so excited to see you, right? It's very unique. There's not a lot of artists who do that.
Yeah, I feel like there is we are having a conversation in the car, right? And like this idea that we're making things, we're creating spaces, we're offering again like these vessels for communities to do what they wish with. And it's sort of, I think of it almost like it's the spinach in the smoothie. Like there's like bigger intentions, like, you know, like if I were to walk you outside right now, like it just looks like a mess. Like it's these bags filled with mulch, there's plywood, there's tools on the ground, like, and we're making something that's going to be beautiful, as this at one point was one of the best messes we've ever made. So like one of my job descriptions is just professional mess maker. But the point is not to create the thing. The whole underlying foundation is people, right? It's like, it's supporting this ever widening, this ever expanding act of becoming that we're all in process with. And any art making that happens, any project, any exhibition, from my standpoint as to how I'm participating with this, and you and I really resonate with this, Megan, it's like, it's in support of anyone that will have any little thread to it, you know, like fray the edges of our fabric as much as you want and run those threads into the wind, because it's not about keeping it clean and tidy and fixed and here's our exhibition framed and perfect. It's a meal, it's a buffet, like come and participate with this, because it's about nourishing people, it's about connecting people, it's about empowering people. It's far more important for us to offer ownership to people in the community versus just like locking the studio doors and making a thing and then revealing it. Like that's not the point. Which is, I think, something that's beautiful about your practice, Megan, that you exist within that. That's very much why our projects go well, because we're on that same page. And then to zoom out another level, like that was very much like the chemistry as we were creating the Wonder Sound in 2016. You know, like these partnerships. Again, I felt like the beneficiary of something where I stepped into the museum having already established these long-standing relationships with all these different community centers and schools. And that's that's the goal of the culture of the museum, is to continue to grow those. And it's did my mom just join in here? I saw hi, darling.
Yeah.
Mom,
Hi,
hello.
Can't wait to see you. Wes has a lot of fans, but I think his parents might be high on that list.
Pretty much so.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I so thinking about that, it's not the thing. We're not working to make the thing. We're working to make the experience and bring as many people into it as we can. And I hope that's one of the lessons that we've learned from COVID, that people are incredibly important and they're not replaceable. They're not, it's like, for all that grief, right? And all that, like that, and that we're more connected than ever, right?
Yeah.
That something that happens in one part of the world can have this effect globally that we can track, and I think that to be able to do the kind of work that you and I do, you have to have that sense of interconnectedness and the idea that we are all related. We're not the center. I mean, it was like we were talking earlier about, we are not, as humans, the center. It's not like we are the penultimate. We are, like you were saying, we're the little brothers and sisters, right? We're, it decenters us a little bit.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. For everybody out there, we've been listening and reading this book called Braiding Sweetgrass lately, that is very much part of the blood of this project. And it's by an author named Robin Wall Kimmerer. And she's, as we all are, she's many different things, just a few of the things that she is. She's coming from this tradition of indigenous wisdom. She's part of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. She's a poet. She considers herself a bryologist within biology, and a bryologist is someone who specializes in moss. The book is called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, and she has another book called Gathering Moss that's just as great too. And in that book, I feel like, I don't want to leap too far, but the amount of time that she sort of resonates on this idea of reciprocity, of honoring and respecting this living world that we're all sharing, and you're always downstream and upstream from someone, and to participate with that connectedness, and very much so considering every living thing part of this family, and looking at this idea of reciprocity. Of course, like we keep referencing humans, but like the project itself is full of all these different characters, all these plants and animals that then are threaded into these different virtues. And then our project out here, without knowing how timely it would be, as the grant was written prior to the pandemic really locking everything down, like now we are in this place where plants have something to offer us, and we have something to give back in this act of reciprocity, where she says, like, what's the best way to heal and to connect with this world around you? And she tells everyone, like, plant a garden. And like, that's what we're doing. You want to learn about your inner world. You want to learn about your own heart. You want to learn about the beating heart of the world around you. Plant a garden, plant a seed. So it's timely. It's really refreshing. And honestly, like during my time in the like most heated lockdown moment, I was in New York City when New York City was the epicenter of everything, and I wasn't going outside. And the thing that brought me the most peace, I had a little compost bin, and I would just turn the compost on my most stressful days. Like that's what I needed, was to just go and turn the compost and have that connection with soil. And again,
I went on a hike through Tecolote Canyon not too long ago, and there was a family that was hiking barefoot because they were earthing, like that I tried. And I was thinking, that's where we've gone. Like so many of us have gardens, so many of us have been hiking during this time. It's sort of it's instinctual for us, Yeah. And so like thinking about your project, it's the Wonder Sound Garden. It's going to be on the patio next to the Wonder Sound. So it's a direct extension. And it's perfect timing because we need a space like that. It's also terrible timing because how do you gather, right? So how do you gather, even now as children are learning to be around each other, I was telling you about my twin nephews were hanging out with their grandparents for the first time, and they're afraid because there's nobody's been in their house except for their family, right? So I think we take that really seriously, thinking about how do we create a space to allow people to have those serendipitous connections that haven't been as possible over the last year. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about what you're thinking about for this garden and what's it going to be like?
Yeah. So with the many ways to describe this, like, if we have this whole expanse of soil, like which handful to share with you, right? I'm going to start just by showing a little image, some show and tell, just to kind of prime your imaginations. So this is just a mock-up that we had. Our deck, kind of runs along the edge in here, and then through these doorways, you would get to the Wonder Sound. And we're creating a dome. Originally, we were going to have 3, but we've simplified it. So there's one large dome that actually kind of takes the place of both of those. And to be able to have these garden beds and planters and places to sit and places to catch this great southwest light that happens here. And this space that is intended for gathering both humans and light and plants and air and passing birds and the palms that are out there and
the trolleys.
This salt air that's coming off the bay, it's participating with all the elements. So first and foremost, I see it as a place to gather with yourself. It's a place to take a deep breath. It's a place to step into that sound, mind, and body as much as you are able to. And then being able to do that with whoever happens to be around. Again, we're in this moment where we're so zoomed out. I don't know if that's a phrase. If it's not, it should be like just zoomed out, as in we're like burnt out from being on Zoom so often. And to be able to have a place to gather with people where there is that social distance ability, there's that fresh air, just on a very practical level, it's a safe place to be in public with other people. And then from that, I really think oftentimes as a kid, I can remember feeling out like I might be kind of shy to like ask questions of someone. So to get to know them, to do things side by side, to like both be digging in the dirt, to be climbing up the rope ladder, and then to run outside, to coexist within a space where you're getting to know their body language. You're getting to know so much of what they're saying by how they move, by eye contact, by facial expressions, by pausing and, having these moments. How many times have we done this? Like, let me show you something. Let me show you this. Being able to have like little stones that are just like, in the garden beds. And let me show you this flower petal that I found. And this act of gathering, I think is going to be really beautiful because there's this presence that sits within the whole museum. Then you level into the Wonder Sound itself, and then to this garden where it really is a place to pause. I think people need some spaces that are a little long wavelengths, and it'll be playful and sometimes a little wild in here with kids, but like this patio has sort of turned into like the default like resting spot. It's kind of the landing point. It's like the nest where the older kids are maybe running around here, and then the 2-3-year-olds are kind of having a snack, they're having their juice, their adult is sitting on a bench, maybe the nanny is there, and they just kind of need a second to breathe. And it's like this pause point. And so we want to accommodate that pause. We want to accommodate that inhale, and then let them get a little linger before that exhale happens. I love liminal spaces. I love thresholds. It feels like a spot in between for people. And we're always just trying to accommodate and like leave some little breadcrumbs of like, here's a few things to think about. We know you're going to sit here, so let us give you some poetry to chew on. Let us like bathe you in plants. Let us give you almost like a forest bathing experience with all these greens. Yeah. yeah, how do you see it fitting into gathering, Megan, as you've written the grant and now we're starting to flesh it out, and you're there as an embodied experience? How do you see the gathering?
Well, I'm so glad that you brought up grown-ups, because we are half children and half adults. On any given day, there are often even more adults sometimes than children in our building. And caregivers of young children have been through so much in the last year. So I think you're talking about giving this gift of a place to just kind of stop, take a breath. The palm trees are waving. There's like you said, the sea air. Where it's San Diego, it's usually very beautiful, right? And everything is taken care of, right? There's something for everyone in this moment. I mean, it reminds me of, I think it's the ASPCA website that has pictures of dogs on the website, because they said just looking at a picture, looking into the eyes of a dog in a picture can calm you down in that time.
Wear a dog costume for this, but I decided.
I mean, we could always start over.
Just the sight, though. Yeah, there's something that happens, right?
Right. And the space that you're creating has this sense of plants at different levels, and you have the natural materials that you're using, which we probably should explain the mulch at some point, because it's the big mulch reveal. But it's very holistic, right? In thinking about that space and the benefits for all ages of people, right?
Yeah.
And all roles, really.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. To just give some more specifics of what's going to happen out there. So that's what we're doing with all this mulch, right? A little drum roll. We've got, if you can think of like a really simple ceramics project, you might have made like a little coil bowl or a little coil pot as a kid or as an adult. And now scale that bowl up to about 10 feet and then flip it over. We are going and creating all of these long coils with what essentially is like a sandbag, but a really long one. And then we're filling all of these long sandbags that make these long circular coils with a little doorway cut out. We're filling it with mulch that we've been going and gathering from the Miramar greenery. The Miramar landfill has a greenery program where you can pick up mulch for free if you're a San Diego resident.
Good plug.
Yeah.
Tammy, put it in the chat.
So it's really beautiful because this is like a very low tech, like we're measuring everything just with like literal feet lengths. And then we're going and filling those bags and you stack them on top of one another. And then we're using barbed wire. And this is per the suggestion of a place called Cal Earth Institute. We're sort of following their plans. And then you take barbed wire and you put it in between the bags as a friction, as a stop. And Cal Earth described this really beautiful sort of paradigm shift with barbed wire. They talked about barbed wire as this thing that oftentimes is a deterrent for the movement and flow of people or animals, and it confines people. It has a dark history of being used all over the world in a lot of aggressive and violent ways. And they said, we're taking this material, and they create these structures, these domes in places where natural disasters have occurred to offer shelter to people who need shelter desperately in that moment. It's also a really affordable way for folks in different parts of the world to have freedom and liberation to create a shelter and to create a home, to create a community. So they're taking this material that was aggressive and confining and creating it to be a tool for liberation, a tool for creating literal homes. And so we're going to coil, and then it creates this spot where there's a little circular window at the top. And then we're going to surface that whole thing so that it's smooth. And then I'm going to paint plant murals all over it. And then we're going to be creating all these different planters with a variation of greenery coming out of it. Lots of places to sit, lots of places to still come to the edge of the rail and look out. The whole floor is going to be painted with this whole big, beautiful plant mural vibe also. And it's this, intention that it sort of flows with the rest of the exhibition. And it's sort of like a 2.0. We're going to kind of break the color pattern that's here and use a new colorway, but there'll be poetry, there'll be language scattered throughout it as well. And, you know, like it offers nice moments of engagement too, because we can do, you know, seed starting afternoons. We can do how to make your own compost. We can do little planted pots where we can do a whole afternoon where maybe you get to like paint your pot and then you plant a little tomato plant and you go home with it. Like anything that offers the ability for people to like get their hands dirty, like is exciting. It creates those opportunities out there.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good transition, actually. I know that you want to take us through a bit of a meditation, partly because as we were discussing what gathering looks like, right?
Yeah.
So often we've gathered on Zoom over the last year. We've gathered with our friends and our family and our colleagues, and it's made us rethink about, you know, how do we interact, how do we connect with each other. So before we move into the Q&A, I think you wanted to do a little exercise with us.
Yeah. So as you are able, I'm going to invite you to stand up. That is your choice, but I'm going to stand up here in the Wonder Sound, and I'm going to invite you to just kind of loosen up for a second. This is going to be a moment for us to inhabit our own bodies and to participate with some things that are elemental. I'm going to raise this up slightly. Okay. Okay. So as you are able, I would like you to go and open your shoulders up just a little bit. You can take your hands and push your shoulders just slightly like that. And I want you to just kind of roll your arms and roll your shoulders and kind of feel the stretch on the side over here. This is also a shout out to my mom, who has taught stretch classes for my whole life. So I grew up doing Darlene Bruce, and we would do this during lockdown as well. And just stretch, feel that good stretch on the side of your ribs and your back. You can do that with your neck as well. And you can kind of switch sides again, grab your wrist and pull that over. Just kind of do some twists, some trunk twists over here, some tree trunk twists. See, even our language is threaded to trees, that we share that trunk language, the human body and the tree, the limbs of a tree. Our language even shows our connections with that. And then again, with that nice big open chest, I want you to take a nice big full breath. So take your hands and just imagine that you can actually like pull air into your lungs. So breathe deep with me really quick. Exhale. Put that out. And breathe in again. Hold it. Exhale out. Feel your body relax. Feel the ground that you're standing on. Kind of adjust your feet and feel that you're standing on the surface of the earth. Let's take one big last breath together. Breathe that in. Exhale out. Okay, take these hands that you've got, right? If I were to tell you that you're made of earth, that you're made of stardust, that you're made of soil, it's true. And I want you to take your hands and I want you to just sort of touch your upper body and just say thank you to your body. Go up to your head and just kind of scratch your head. Thank you, thank you. Thank you for breathing when I don't ask you to breathe. Thank you for thinking and for healing. Thank you for being. And I want you to go and imagine that you've got this little handful of soil right here. So let me see your handful of soil if you're out there. So you've got that. And I want you to take this handful of soil and I want you to kind of hold it close. And I want you to take a moment just to pause and think of the things in your life that need healing, that need nourishment, that need growth. And I want you to just sort of breathe those things into the soil. With that soil, go and kind of close that up. And I want you to go and push it right down here into your heart, into your chest. And then kind of pat on your chest a little bit, kind of pat it down, make sure it's got room in there to grow, some good nourishment. Then I want you to go and take your hands again. And I want you to take a handful of water and imagine that you're actually like dipping this into a creek or dipping this into a lake. Picture somewhere that you love to go that's a nice, fresh body of water. And you're going to take that water, again, this body of water, this human body, or you think of a body of poetry or artwork, this language that we all share, right? And then you're going to take this water and you're going to think of those things that need healing, that need nourishment. And I want you to think of just one quick little mantra, and I'm going to have you fill in the blank. So for me, mine is be home everywhere. And yours can be curious, be ready, be healed, be nourished, be made new, be patient, whatever you need in this moment. I want you to think of that. Like that's the water that's sloshing around in your hand right now, okay? And again, I want you to just take a nice big deep breath. And then with that handful of water, just pour it over the top of your own head and let it kind of wash down you and wash down into that soil that you just planted in this garden of yourself, this garden in your heart, right? And then I'm going to take our hands again. And you're going to collect a few seeds. And these seeds are the people in your life that you have connections with. And maybe those connections are strong. Maybe those connections are afraid or they're distant. Maybe they're people that you haven't seen in a while. Maybe this is a relationship that needs healing. But maybe think of 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people. And I want you to take those people as little seeds, little wildflower seeds in your hands right now, okay? And you're going to look at them closely. If you're with somebody else, show them these seeds. Maybe they happen to be one of them. If they are, maybe you can just give them a little wink, let them know. So we've got these seeds here, right? And these seeds are seeds of imagination, right? They can grow into anything. We're creating this metaphor in our chest. And so they're not limited to grow only as tall as your waist or to only be green. Like they can grow into any color, into any form. And the good ingredients that are mixed into here of this mantra or mantras that you have, this healing poetry that you have spoken into your own chest, into your own heart, this water, this soil, this breath, these are all good ingredients that are ready for you. Right? This soil is ready to grow with you, for you, in response to you, give and receive. So take these seeds right here. And you can even kind of whisper the names into them. And I want you to step back and hold them close to you. And let's take one big collective breath in this active gathering. We not only have the people that we might be in the same room with, or in the same building, or in the same city, or in the same state, or in the same country, or on the same continent, or on the same world. Like we're all threaded together, literally, but also metaphorically. We keep these people with us. We keep this home with us everywhere, in this garden that travels wherever your body happens to be. They're always growing there, right? So take these seeds and let's breathe in a nice big collective breath. We're gathering together here in one breath, in oneness, in this wholeness. We are of sound mind and body right now. And there is a sound between us. There's a threshold which we cross by breathing together, right? We're going to sound the deep parts of this good soil and let our roots grow deep. So let's breathe in together. Hold it. Exhale out. And inhale again. Push those seeds deep into the soil of yourself. And exhale out. In the same way that there's this give and take with plants, with this carbon dioxide and this good oxygen that they make, that we breathe in and we breathe out, what they need. There's this give and take. That's the same for us as well. Each one of us has this thing that the other needs as this ecosystem. And what's crazy, the word ecosystem comes from this Greek word oikos, and oikos means home, right? So we're all sharing this home, this ecosystem. And what rains on you, rains on me. What I breathe out, you breathe in. And then from that, the kindness that you offer, the hope that you offer, the good listening that you offer, that's part of the ecosystem that we're in. So I'm going to just give you a little garden blessing, that may all the good soil that you have in your garden now, may all of the pain and grieving that you've experienced in this last season be composted, be turned over, and may these seeds of what's to come in this next season grow tall and strong and verdant and green and lush and thrive. And may your constant active becoming bring blooms and flowers and fruit and orchards that are just full of abundance. May this coming season be abundant for you. So just take that, breathe it in, exhale out. Let's do another together. Exhale out. One last breath, because I like things in groups of 3. Exhale out again. All right. Yourself snaps over here. So it's 6:50 now.
Yeah.
What else were we gonna do, Megan?
That was beautiful. Thank you for doing that. And we want to open it up to some Q&A from our guests. And I know we have one question already, which I can answer. Or Carrie, you want to check in? Are you all relaxed now?
Oh, yeah, all I was going to do is we have gotten, there's a question in the chat that, yes, please answer that initially.
Matt.
And then anyone
Yeah.
else, if you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand and we can allow you to talk, or you can just put your question in the chat. And Megan and Wes are monitoring that. So I will probably go away again, but just wanted to let you guys know that.
Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, a question is from Matt about when we're working with amazing artists like Wes or Toshiko, how much freedom to wander from the original concept do you give them as the materials guide them in different directions? And how different is the wonder sound from the concept drawings? He also thanks us for the breathing.
Yeah.
Matt, another wonderful practitioner from a sister organization on the East Coast. So I would say we really trust artists, and we do a lot of work to find the right partners, and we ask good questions, and we play together, and so then we really have a sense of what can we expect from each other. I think, I don't know if you feel differently, Wes, but it's, so then when it comes down to, hey, we want to do something completely different, or we want to shift this from something as seemingly simple as a name change to something completely new added in because there's a stroke of inspiration, right? There's the room to do that. It was, and thinking about drawings and the differences, there are some for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I felt like I was given a tremendous amount of trust to create this large sort of mysterious thing. And there were a tremendous amount of drawings, tons of concepting, tons of conversation. But with something like this, a lot of it just kind of existed in my imagination for a long time. And there was a significant amount of change, but I would say it's majority what we thought that it would be once we were sort of established into it, with the caveat that it was constantly changing. Right? So with this thing, it's essentially like a large 3-story house that had blueprints, and we had a really fantastic team that were out here. Bill, Ernie, Dave, Matt, Scott, a million people's hands that were on here. I'm picturing Jill, I'm picturing Hannah, I'm picturing Jenny. Like there were so many people, way more than I could name, that came in that offered helping hands to this. And it was very fluid, the same way that you might have a painting and you're like, well, maybe this would actually fit better over here, or this idea fits better over here. So let's shift things around slightly, even down to the blueprint, where we might have a room go from being 6 foot tall to 4 foot tall, and let's elongate it out. Or we find, oh, this would actually do well to put like an emergency exit over here. So like, let's think about that and shift things around. So both practically and from an imagination standpoint, there were always things that were getting tweaked. And I like it like that. I think it's really fun to be able to find a better idea in the moment, which I think with my hands better than I think with my mind oftentimes. And so making things, I'll discover ideas very much in the moment. And I was given a tremendous amount of freedom to think with my hands, to adjust. And that's very much the case with our garden here. I showed you the sketch, and I showed up with that sketch, just the other day, and told Megan, I was like, I think it actually spatially works better to subtract these other domes. And she was like, great, we're on the same page. I was thinking the same thing now that we're actually making it. So there's a tremendous amount of back and forth. It's very conversational. It's a dialogue. I would even, whatever, a trialogue, a quadrilogue, because it's a conversation with the materials, with the place, with the people, all of that. And it's very much in flow, so much trust to be able to make choices with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the heart stays the same, right?
Yeah. I mean, because that's what we really start with, the why.
Yeah.
And through this process, we don't go to our community partners to test out ideas with knowing that it's going to look exactly like this. We go with an open heart to say, what's happening in your community that's going really well? What stories do you want to share with us? And then this process of co-creation begins. And I also want to give a shout out. So the process that we began with the Wonder Sound with Wes now is the process we use for many of our art installations. So Tanya Aguaniga's Tiki Tico was developed in this way with community partners. Panca's El Masaya, which will open this year, was also developed this way. And then David Reynoso's Teatro Piñata, which will be opening at the end of the year, all developed with this idea going in to say, what are the strengths of our community and how can we bring those into the work that we're doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a question about the drawings from the Wonder Sound and will it be carried into the garden? And I also am hoping that maybe you can talk a little bit about the poetry that you're adding into the installation itself.
Yeah. There's going to be like this here. We're going to go on a little walk over here. With all of the writing, you can see some other spots where there's all of this writing that's all over the floor. And you might be referencing like the illustrations. There's going to be a lot of new artwork that's happening. So there is going to be continued illustrations, but instead of focusing on animals, as most of the installation in here has animals, it's going to be plant illustrations that are going to be out there. And it's just going to be everywhere. And like, I love your line of like, it's chaotic yet centering. Like there's going to be all of these plants everywhere. And then there's going to be poetry that happens as well. With this fictional language, you can kind of come in here. Most of y'all already know this, but now this is like the Rosetta Stone room, if you will, where there's like the translations of all the letters. So this fictional language that was created for the project will make its way outside as well. Yeah. Just going to keep walking around here.
And those of you who are interested, during the pandemic, which is still going on, Wes made the language available on his website. So we can put a link to that or send it around so that you can decode at home. And kids have been writing their own messages in the language from home.
Yeah.
Yeah, we reopened our main level in the park, but we haven't opened upper yet. And I'm so excited for people to come back into this space and to discover the nooks and crannies and, you know,
Yeah.
and I'm, you know, one of the other questions that's come up in the chat is, how long have you been doing arts? Did you start when you were a kid? And when did you know that this was what you were going to do?
I love that question. I love it because I can picture loving art as a little kid. I can remember my mom and dad just made art supplies available to me. I was always really encouraged just because I thought it was fun. And so they saw that I enjoyed it. So they, you know, just had stacks of scrap paper and crayons and easels and things like that. And I can remember like taking watercolor classes as a little kid. I can remember showing up to watercolor class in this gigantic paper hat that I made that I thought was so cool that I like refused to take off.
I'm sure it was cool.
Yeah, it was super cool. And then I came back to art in college, kind of by accident, sort of. Like I really wanted to study abroad, and I wasn't an art major at all. I considered being an art major, but I had already scrapped that idea. I thought maybe I want to like run a summer camp or be a frog biologist or something. I didn't really know. And all my study abroad programs had fallen through. And literally my last option was I had to declare an art major and then go with the art department and bounce around Western Europe, which was like, at the time, my last choice. I didn't want to go to Europe. I wanted to go to Shanghai or Beijing by myself. And I didn't want to go to Western Europe, and I didn't want to go with a bunch of people. And this was exactly that. But I went, and my life was changed by it. I got to see so much art. So I have all my teachers to thank for that. And it shifted something in me. And I came back with this idea of like, I love making things and I want to continue to see what this looks like. And it just kind of grew and grew and grew, and had lots of other good teachers and good inspiration from that. But that was a really big shift. And I've had other moments that were like, you know, went from like, oh, now I thought I would just maybe do this in college, and now I'm actually like doing it as a job. I thought maybe this is just something I do in my 20s. And then now I'm actually still doing it in my 30s. So I don't need to give all those, but that study abroad was the big turning point.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I think we're going to go a little bit over. Hopefully that's okay. If you have to leave, we understand. But there's a couple great questions that have come up in the chat. Yeah, Wes, you have to stay. You're not allowed to go anywhere. So one of the questions, and if I understand it correctly, it's, you know, the artists that we're featuring this year. So we have a really extraordinary curatorial program of artists who are doing projects that are very much responding to the moment. And the question is about, how do they find gathering together or the ability to speak to each other? And I thought, thank you for that question, because it's something that we think about quite a bit, because children don't necessarily distinguish this space and this space. It's all kind of a fluid experience. And so as much as possible, we try to connect the artists with each other. And I know that both Panka and David Reynoso have been inspired by the Wonder Sound, and they're kind of riffing off of it. And hopefully next week, there's going to be a moment where the artists can meet each other. I know that Panka and Katie Ruiz had the opportunity to have lunch together with us as well, because I think that that's having a conversation about the bigger picture of what we're trying to do around art and play and community engagement is so important. And when the artists have that conversation, it really gets into the threads of what they're doing, right?
Yeah. No, that cross-pollination and just like the energy that's shared, like even today, like I went I went down the slide 2 times in a row, down into Panka's spot, because it's just like, I just freaking love her work. Like, and I've sort of been watching Panka's stuff develop mostly through Instagram. I've never even met her in person. So I'm like, yeah, let's meet. Like we're crossing with some of like our same people, like these mutual friends, and then jumping in. And, you know, there's all these different people that are now kind of like parts of my family. Like I was telling you, I got to hang out with Tat Futan in New York, and it just felt like this kindred spirit, because I already knew him in some way through his work. Like I already trusted, I was like, oh, like our hearts are kind of similar. I kind of get where you're going with this. And that happens regularly, where I'm like, I'm made a better version of myself by someone's piece. And it gives that opportunity to thread that together in real life, which again, we were talking about this earlier, that can be hard to come by, to have that happen in real life. And so when the museum fosters that, it makes my work better. Hopefully it makes the other person's better. It, like your and I conversation better, which then makes the project better. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so important to me to connect artists with each other, because we were having a conversation earlier about mycelium and mushrooms and fungal connections between trees. And I think that that's what this place does. The New Children's Museum creates a place where artists can experiment with ideas, but then they also learn so much from the children here and from our perspective on play, that then goes off into the rest of the world, right? You take that with you, all the same thing for all of us as staff. I feel very strongly about visitor experience staff. I think they're the most important people in children's museums. And so every interaction that we have with often emerging professionals, they're going off into the world and they're going to have like dandelions, right? Like they're taking the seed into the rest of the world, because we can't have an impact on every child in the world, right? But we can have impact on teachers and artists and families who then have that impact throughout the world.
Yeah, little seeds.
Yeah. And well, actually, so maybe this for one last question. So 5 years ago, you were here. How has your practice changed since you were here creating the Wonder Sound? Because you've done so many projects since then.
Yeah. I mean, like anyone else, I've experienced all kinds of different life since 2016, and my art making really is very much like a journaling process for me that includes everyone in my life. Like usually the best way to sort of get to know like what's happening in my mind at any given time is to look at the current project. And I have a number of different projects that are installation based kind of across the country right now that were also sort of shut down in this pandemic moment. But like since then, like some of the more significant ones have developed to be like very question based. Like I have a project in Massachusetts, the Peabody Essex Museum right now, called Where the Questions Live, that uses this act of question asking to be, well, maybe a question can be a trail, maybe a question is a doorway, maybe a question is a map, maybe a question is an invitation, and maybe a question is a wildfire, and it's many things. And so that becomes the entry point. And I've played around with a lot of different physical forms. Brian Bangeter and I made that film. That's the documentary of the Wonder Sound. And since then, my friend Ryan Shoemaker and I made a film for that Peabody Essex Museum, as well as for a project called Adventure Forest in Denver. But sort of blending more into like this, like a fictionalized sort of art film. Like it's not a documentary. It's very much like this thread of ideas. It's very abstracted, but it's very cinematic and shot on location in swamps and on Martha's Vineyard, coastal areas. And it's very much still in this thread of being connected to the natural world, but almost like based off of like this handful of like mystical experiences, like just deeply moving, unexplainable metaphysical happenings that occurred to me. Like I just happened to be there to receive them as a gift. So started playing around with that in a different format more, a lot of sound things. Started to treat things like this as containers for ideas in an even larger sense. So I'm working on a handful of projects in Colorado right now, at some other spaces that are really kind of pushing the limits as to what I even know how to build. With something like this, like I know how to build all this, but I did, and I had a great team that we did this together, but now I'm starting to design a lot of these dome type things and all these really wild experiences that make me lean into collaboration even more, because I literally don't even know how to build these things. Like, it's like riffs off of things like the web room too. It's like this multi-storied crazy net thing with ropes going through it, and then like this big, huge bouldering area, really focusing on some of the things I've learned about using light. There's this whole section of the exhibition where it's just completely dark, and we're kind of leaning into almost like James Turrell meets Frank Lloyd Wright meets like your little cousin who's 8 and what he would build. Like, if you were to fuse those together, like that's kind of what we're trying to make. And have learned a lot about light, like using these different complementary light colors in connection to each other, and then like the shrinking of a space, and then like letting that open up. Learned a lot more about architecture, but a lot more just about like my own heart since. So just like, I feel like I've become more articulate in how I phrase certain poems, and just the value of what a poem is. Like, you know, I might have a poem that just sort of shows up in my mouth or on my journal, and that is just as important as anything like this. This idea that like the act of creation doesn't have a hierarchy for me, and I try and have a large continuous process. So none of these things are islands. Like, they're all just this one big fabric. They're one large family, and it gives me permission to let things be a little more fluid, and I feel less pressure to get every single idea into one project. So it'll probably show up in yeah, so just kind of embracing the fabric of that and zooming out, where I used to have like the art education and then like the objects as like two different things almost. And I've been able to like find a way to have those all under the same umbrella. And a lot of it's just like a mental shift, like the conversation that a nanny and a child might have making art that I never even see. That is just as much the art as anything that ends up on a wall. It's like that social practice. Like that's the generativity. That's the act of creation. It's all of it. It's just like, I feel like I've just been able to zoom out a little bit more, and it's the whole thing. It's the mole, it's the soup, it's all the stuff in the stock pot at the same time, not just like the one spoonful that you get that's been presented to you at the table. It's the whole thing. Yeah. What about you, Megan? How's your process shifted since we made this?
You know, it's hard to beat the experience of developing the Wonder Sound with you. But I think I'm a better listener than I was before. I think that I'm much more open to taking risks. Coming back into that space, into the Wonder Sound, it's mapped with so many experiences that I've had in developing it and building it. You know, today I was thinking about, as you know, like I will not show you my fingernails, how dirty they are from the mulch, right? You know, but thinking like, as it was happening, like, I will remember this, like this feeling of being in the dirt, literally in the dirt, creating this thing that will have such an impact on people. So I think I'm more and more confident in my ability to relate to other people and learn from other people through that process. And with that, I think we're at time.
I want to thank everyone for coming and let you know that this was recorded. So if anybody had friends that didn't make it, we will be posting the recording. There was one question I'm going to touch on super quickly. And it was a question about if adults ever get to play in the spaces at night without kids being in them, so that the adults can have sort of that uninhibited play. And
come on over right now. We're ready.
Yeah.
We're here.
As soon as we are able to have events in the evening, we do have some, we have a couple of different evening events where we bring in people and they get to play with it. Our annual gala, which is a very large event where the adults also get to play. So But you're always welcome to come during the day when we're open as well. And I will do a plug. We are open for members right now. We're opening to the public on May 21st. And we'll be doing a little ribbon cutting that morning. And then, we've made it through this 14-month experience and we're back. So we're very, very excited. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Wes. We're so excited to have you in our home again. We get to have Wes all week next week working in the museum. So, you really are a part of our family and we appreciate everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you all very much for
Thank you,
coming.
everyone. Really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
everybody. Yeah. See you, everybody. Bye.